Hello everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. This channel used to operate under the name SaberThoughts, but after not making any videos nor posting consistently on Twitter for the past 2 years, I decided to rebrand for a fresh start and a new look, now that I'm returning to content creation. The rebranding was also inspired, in part, due to a slight shift in the overall nature of the content I will be producing. Previously, when this channel was under the name SaberThoughts, I mostly focused on election predictions or documentary-style videos, focusing on one single political figure or one single political race that was happening at the time. Now, instead, I will be focusing on three things. One, covering the current political landscape, looking at current legislation that is going on, basically major events happening in the American political world. Second, focusing on the Republican Party's policy goals and their policy platform, the negatives, the positives, critiquing their messaging, and also talking about their electoral strategy. And thirdly, I will be talking about how the Republicans can win at the national level, at the state level, and the local level. And particularly also for the state level, I will be going over the different Republican parties or different Republican state parties around the country and seeing how they can improve what they're doing right and how they can win elections in that state. So that's a little bit of the outlook for what this channel will be focusing on. Before we get into the topic of today's video, if you could please do me a huge favor and like the video down below and subscribe to this channel if you are new. Follow me on Twitter. The link is in my description right here. Click that link right there to go to my Twitter page. And share this video on Twitter. I do post all the videos on Twitter. I post a link to them. Any of those things would be fabulously helpful for my channel, as I hope it gets rediscovered after the rebranding so I can get my viewership back up to where it was, especially after such a long hiatus of not posting, and help the channel continue to grow in the weeks and months to come. So without further ado, let's get into the topic at hand today. And that topic is, of course, previewing Super Tuesday, happening, of course, this coming Tuesday on March 5th. And Super Tuesday is the day where a third of all delegates for the nomination processes for both the Republican and the Democrat parties are available, are up for grabs. And there are obviously a lot of races, therefore, happening in different states, and we'll be taking a look at them. But first, let's take a look at the current landscape of the Republican nomination process. And of course, it's not much of a race at all at this point. Trump has been running away with it against Nikki Haley. Ron DeSantis, Vivek, and a bunch of other candidates that were running in the race have since dropped out after Iowa. It was Trump versus Nikki Haley as in New Hampshire and in every other state since then. And it's been nothing short of a blowout, with a couple somewhat competitive races here and there. But Trump has won the 8 contests that have happened to this date. One of them being the Virgin Islands, where he won 75-25, and the 2 states happening before that caucus, which were Iowa and New Hampshire. And New Hampshire was a state that Nikki Haley based her entire campaign upon and proceeded to lose it by 11 points, despite registering a lot of Democrats and independents to vote in the Republican primary because it was an open primary. So therefore, not just Republicans could vote in it, any voters were able to vote in it. And then Trump proceeded to win the caucus in Nevada, since he's the only candidate running, because Nikki Haley decided to run in the primary in Nevada, which was not going to count for any delegates, it was more for bragging rights, and she couldn't even brag about it because she lost to none of these candidates, which in short was the write-in option on the ballot. So I'm assuming a lot of people wrote in Donald Trump, so she's still also Donald Trump when he wasn't even on the ballot, which is really quite fitting of her campaign at this point. As we look at this campaign map here on Wikipedia, and we can see all the blue states, which of course signifies the states that Donald Trump has won. And again, since Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and the Virgin Islands, since then we've had South Carolina, Nikki Haley's home state, another state along with New Hampshire that she based her entire campaign on winning, and she lost 60-40 to Donald Trump in her home state. And then move up to Michigan, and Trump almost cracked 70% in the primary there, where a third of the state delegates were up for grabs. And then he proceeded to, yesterday, sweep all the remaining delegates available in Michigan through winning the Michigan caucus almost unanimously. And then Missouri, he literally won the primary there unanimously, or the caucus, I should say, rather. He won all the delegates there. And in Idaho, he won 85% of the vote, getting such a high threshold of the vote that he also got all of the delegates there. So coming in yesterday, he had 122 delegates, meaning he actually exactly doubled his delegate count in one day, from 122 to 244, while Nikki Haley did not pick up any delegates in the 3 state caucuses that were held yesterday and remained at 24 delegates. Now, you need 1,215 delegates to win the Republican nomination, meaning that Trump has a more than 200 delegate lead upon her and is cruising toward the nomination at this point, having not lost a single state in the Republican primary, with only 2 of those 8 contests being even remotely close, with Trump winning by 11 in New Hampshire and 20 in South Carolina. Every other race has been a blowout by every sense of the word. But Nikki Haley has said that she's going to stay in through Super Tuesday. Well, what are her prospects for Super Tuesday? Does she have any chance at any states? And does Trump, on the other hand, have a chance to clinch the nomination on Super Tuesday? To answer these questions, let's look at the states that will be having their primary elections and caucuses on Super Tuesday. And we can see the states here of Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, being the only caucus of the day, and Vermont and Virginia. In total, there are 865 delegates up for grabs on Super Tuesday across these states, meaning that even if Trump got all 865, which at this point, let's be honest, would not be surprising given his performance last night when he got about 120 out of about 120 out of 3 states, he still would not reach the delegate threshold necessary to clinch the nomination. But assuming he has a great performance on Super Tuesday, he will be able to clinch it probably by the end of the month, is what a lot of pundits are predicting based on his recent performances. Now, the only states Nikki Haley really has a shot to win are states like Massachusetts and Vermont that are typically very, very Democrat, liberal-leaning states. Since Republicans in those states tend to be more moderate, more centrist Republicans, and she also can have some independents and Democrats possibly crossing over to vote for her like she had in New Hampshire. And you could even put Maine in this category of states that she has a possibility to at least be competitive in. So basically the 3 New England states up for grabs on March 5th, Maine, Massachusetts, and Vermont. The other states, it really is expected to be more of the same, complete dominance from Donald Trump against Nikki Haley. When you look at some of the other states, Alabama, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, states that Trump did very, very well in, both in 2016 and 2020 to varying degrees. Even a state like California, which has 169 delegates up for grabs in that state alone, is expected to go heavily for Donald Trump. And if he wins it by a substantial margin, he will get a large share of those 169 delegates. And states that I mentioned that Nikki Haley has a chance to be more competitive in have 20 in Maine, 40 in Massachusetts, and 17 in Vermont. So they're not exactly states where she can win a large chunk of delegates. This race is over. Nikki Haley has no path to victory. There's no state where she can get a large swath of the delegates. There's no state she's really favored in. Again, she might pick off a Vermont or a Massachusetts maybe, or even a Maine, but really beyond that, she doesn't have a chance in many of these states to, again, even be competitive, let alone win them. I should also not fail to mention that the Washington, D.C. primary and North Dakota caucus will be happening before Super Tuesday. So the delegate counts showed in this video for Trump and Haley will not be reflected even going into Super Tuesday. Regardless, even if Trump were to take all of the delegates, he still would not be able to win the nomination by sweeping Super Tuesday, to clarify my previous point. But also, North Dakota, he's very favored in. He won almost 80% of the vote practically in the general election in 2016 and 2020. which should be no surprise to anyone. So he's very favored to sweep that caucus, much like he did in Idaho, Missouri, Michigan. In D.C., I can honestly see Nikki Haley winning, similar to how I could see her being competitive or winning the primaries in Maine, Massachusetts, or Vermont, a more moderate Republican/liberal state. But how would that even be a net positive for Nikki Haley if she won the D.C. primary? So then she can say that people that reside in the swamp support her to be the nominee for the Republican Party? And so she can't tout it, and it'd be embarrassing because that would be her first primary victory if she does pick it up. And it would be a little speck on the dot of the primary map that would be colored in for her color of a state, or in this case, not even a state, a district, a primary, that she won. So Nikki Haley is not in a good spot, and she has no viable pathway. So it's just a matter of time now before Trump wins the nomination. He probably will set some records on Super Tuesday as far as landslide victories go, and that much we know for a fact, that he will be the nominee unless something happens, that he gets convicted or thrown off the ballot or something like that. The Supreme Court decision will be happening tomorrow, we found out, regarding his appearance on the Colorado ballot and the ballots in other states, Democrat states, that are trying to remove him from said ballot. But beyond that, as far as any conventional method, Donald Trump will be resoundingly the Republican nominee, and a lot of political pundits are looking to results such as the New Hampshire result, the South Carolina result, where Trump is barely cracking 60%, as, oh, it's trouble for Trump. He's not uniting the Republican Party behind him. Republican voters want to move on from Donald Trump. But this is not true, especially when you look to results like Idaho, 85% of the vote, almost unanimously winning the Michigan and Missouri caucuses. Republican voters are united behind Donald Trump. He has historically had a 90% approval rating among Republican voters, and Republican voters will be getting behind him come Election Day in November, and they will be coming out in droves for him. Meanwhile, Biden is actually the one that has a voter turnout and enthusiasm problem, an approval problem, because in Michigan, he barely cracked 80% as the incumbent, running against little to no opposition, no major opposition, whereas Nikki Haley is a major political figure, well-known political figure, that Donald Trump is running against as almost a quasi-incumbent, since he is the former president running in the Republican primary to get renominated to run again, which has really happened maybe 2 other times in American political history. And he has still very rarely, except for Iowa and New Hampshire, gotten below 60% in the primaries. So Trump is in a very good position, make no mistake about it. Look for him to get at least 70% in a lot of these states and perform very, very well, and really put the whole nomination race to rest after Super Tuesday. He's going to have a commanding lead, and then it's looking forward to the general election, where the focus should turn to beating Joe Biden, not beating Nikki Haley, because that is already a done deal.